The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as I heard my wife's voice drifting through the open garage door. She was on speakerphone again, that careless habit of hers that had already cost us a few embarrassing moments with the neighbors. But this time, the conversation made my stomach freeze. "I'm so far out of his league, it's embarrassing." Sarah's voice carried that particular tone she used when talking to her friends about things she thought I'd never understand. Corporate politics, expensive wine, and apparently, me. I crouched lower behind her white crossover, the same SUV I'd surprised her with last Christmas. The same vehicle I'd been maintaining like a devoted husband for the past 8 months. Changing oil, rotating tires, keeping it spotless for her daily commute to Morrison and Associates. "Brad, you don't understand how suffocating it is," she continued, and my stomach dropped. Brad Kellerman. I knew that name. He worked for Pinnacle Security Solutions, our biggest competitor. He fixes my car, makes me coffee every morning, and thinks that makes him husband of the year. Meanwhile, I'm closing million-dollar deals and he's still running that pathetic little security firm out of a strip mall. The male voice on the other end chuckled, a sound that made me want to punch something. "Baby, you deserve so much better. A woman like you with your ambition, your looks, you could have anyone." "I know," Sarah sighed dramatically. "Sometimes I wonder what I was thinking when I married him. He was different then, you know, had that whole mysterious ex-boxer thing going. But now, God, Brad, he's just so ordinary." I stood up slowly, my knees creaking in the silence. At 42, I wasn't the fighter I used to be, but I still had enough muscle memory to know when I was being set up for a knockout punch. The difference was, this time, the fight wasn't in a ring with rules and a referee. "When can I see you again?" Brad's voice had that sleazy undertone that made my skin crawl. "Tomorrow night. He has that stupid poker game with his buddies. I'll tell him I'm working late on the Henderson account." Sarah's laugh was light, carefree, the same laugh she used to save for me. I walked quietly to my workbench and grabbed my phone, checking the date. Tomorrow was Thursday. For 6 months, every other Thursday, Sarah had been working late on the Henderson account. I'd been proud of her dedication, even ordered pizza for one on those nights so she wouldn't come home to cooking duties. What a considerate husband I was. Moving like the shadow I used to be in the boxing ring, I made my way to the kitchen window. Sarah was pacing in our living room, phone pressed to her ear now, but still talking loud enough for me to catch fragments. "Can't wait to get out of this house. Planning something special. He'll never see it coming." That last part made my skin run cold. See what coming? I slipped back into the garage and continued working on her car. But now, every turn of the wrench felt different. Each maintenance task felt like I was preparing the getaway vehicle for my own betrayal. 20 minutes later, Sarah appeared in the garage doorway, all smiles and wifely concern. "Honey, you've been out here forever. Come inside, I made your favorite pasta." I looked up at her, really looked. When had she started wearing makeup around the house? When had her casual clothes become so carefully coordinated? When had she stopped looking at me like I mattered? "Just finishing up," I said, wiping my hands on an old rag. "Your car's been making that noise again. Thought I'd check it out." "You're so good to me, Mike," she said, but her eyes were already checking her phone. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Missionary, the lie came so easily to her that I almost believed it myself. Almost. That night, after Sarah fell asleep, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I went through her purse. The receipts told a story that made my chest tight. Expensive lunches at restaurants I'd never heard of. A jewelry store purchase from last month. She'd told me the earrings were a bonus gift from work. Hotel charges that coincided perfectly with her late meetings. All it was the phone that delivered the real knockout punch. Her text history with Brad painted a picture that made me want to throw up. 6 months of intimate messages, plans, and worst of all, jokes about me. Screenshots of conversations where she'd mocked my attempts at romance, my small business struggles, even my cooking. One message thread from last week made my hands shake. Slashing. Does he suspect anything? Sarah, are you kidding? Mike's the most trusting person alive. Yesterday, he asked if I needed him to pack me lunch for my big meeting. I almost felt bad. Almost. Restrictions. What about after we make this official? I'm meeting with Jennifer's divorce lawyer next week. She says I can get the house, half the business, and alimony. Mike won't know what hit him. Set the phone down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady. Jennifer, Sarah's best friend and maid of honor at our wedding. The same Jennifer who'd been encouraging Sarah to follow her dreams and not settle for less than she deserved. Same Jennifer who'd been fired from my company 3 years ago for embezzling client funds. Suddenly, a lot of pieces started falling into place. I spent the rest of the night in my home office, not planning revenge, not yet, but simply trying to understand how I'd become such a fool. The signs had been there for months. The late nights, the new clothes, the way she'd started criticizing everything about our life together. But what really burned was the casual cruelty of it all. The way she'd accepted my care and attention while planning my destruction. The way she'd let me fix her car so she could drive it to meet her lover. As dawn broke through the office window, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down with a legal pad. At the top, I wrote, "Things Sarah doesn't know about Mike." It was going to be a long list. The next morning, Sarah breezed through the kitchen like nothing had changed, grabbing the coffee I'd made and kissing my cheek with practiced affection. "Don't wait up tonight, honey. The Henderson account is at a critical stage." "Of course," I said, buttering her toast exactly how she liked it. "You work so hard for us." The word us made her flinch slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Someone has to think about our future." After she left, I called my business partner and oldest friend, Danny Morrison. Danny and I had started Morrison Hayes Security together after I retired from boxing, and he was one of the few people who knew all my secrets. "I need a favor," I said when he picked up. "What kind of favor? The legal kind, or the kind that requires an alibi?" "The information kind. I need everything you can find on Brad Kellerman at Pinnacle Security." That was a pause. "This about Sarah?" Danny had always been too perceptive for his own good. "What makes you say that?" "Because you get that tone in your voice when someone's crossed a line. Same tone you had before you knocked out Jimmy Torino in the 8th round. Just find out what you can. Mike, whatever you're thinking, I'm not thinking anything yet. But when I do start thinking, I want to be well informed." Danny sighed. "I'll make some calls." By noon, Danny had called back with a profile that made me smile for the first time in days. Brad Kellerman, 34, divorced twice, currently living in an overpriced bachelor pad downtown. More importantly, he had a reputation in the industry for cutting corners and poaching clients through less than ethical means. "There's more," Danny said. "Word is he's been bragging around town about landing a big fish. Some executive's wife who's going to help him get inside information on competitor bids." My grip tightened on the phone. What kind of inside information? The kind that could put both of them in serious legal trouble if anyone could prove it. I thought about Sarah's sudden interest in my business dealings, her casual questions about upcoming contracts and client lists. Questions I'd answered honestly because I trusted my wife. "Danny, I need you to do something else. Check our client database access logs for the past 6 months. See if there's been any unusual activity on Sarah's login." "Sarah doesn't have—" Danny stopped. "Oh, heck. You gave her your password, didn't you? For emergency access to the household accounts. But those are linked to the business system. I'll check it out." Expelled for Sarah's late night at the office by setting up surveillance of my own. I'd learned a few things about gathering intelligence during my brief stint in the military before my boxing career, and those skills were coming back quickly. I followed Sarah's white crossover from a distance, using Danny's unmarked van. She drove straight to the Marriott downtown, where Brad was waiting in the lobby with flowers and a bottle of champagne. I watched them embrace through the hotel's floor-to-ceiling windows, Sarah melting into his arms like she hadn't melted into mine in years. They looked happy, comfortable, like a real couple. The rage that hit me was different from anything I'd felt in the boxing ring. This was personal, intimate, and it burned with a cold fire that made my vision sharp and my thinking clearer. I took photos, lots of photos. But I also noticed something else. At a corner table in the hotel bar, Jennifer sat alone, watching Sarah and Brad with an expression that wasn't quite happiness. It was calculating, predatory, and it made me wonder what game she was really playing. When Sarah came home at midnight, I was waiting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a concerned expression. "How did the Henderson meeting go?" "Exhausting," she said, not meeting my eyes. "But productive. I think we're going to land the account." "That's wonderful, honey. You deserve all the success in the world." She looked at me then, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been guilt flicker across her face. But it was gone quickly, replaced by that distant politeness she'd been showing me for months. "I'm going to shower and go to bed. Don't wait up." As she headed upstairs, I noticed she was wearing different perfume. Something expensive and sophisticated. Something that definitely wasn't a gift from me. The next morning, Danny called with news that made my coffee taste like ash. "Mike, we have a problem. Sarah's been accessing client files she has no business looking at. Contract details, bid information, security protocols. Everything someone would need to undercut our proposals." "How long?" "Relinquit." 6 months. And Mike, 3 of the contracts we lost to Pinnacle in that time period. We were the preferred vendor until the final round. Someone gave them inside information. I sat in my office, staring at the wall where Sarah and I had hung our wedding photo. In it, we looked young, happy, and completely devoted to each other. I wondered when she'd started seeing me as an obstacle instead of a partner. "Danny, I need you to document everything. Every access, every file, every timestamp. And I need you to do it quietly." "What are you planning?" "I'm not sure yet, but Sarah's about to learn that being out of someone's league works both ways." That afternoon, I drove to Murphy's gym, the old boxing club where I'd trained for 12 years. Murphy himself was long dead, but his nephew Tony still ran the place, and it still smelled like sweat, determination, and the kind of honest violence that had rules. "Mike Hayes," Tony grinned when I walked in. "Thought you'd gone completely soft on me." "Just need to hit something, Tony." "Bad day?" "Bad year." Tony handed me wraps and gloves without another word. Some conversations were better held with heavy bags and speed bags. I spent 2 hours working out frustrations I didn't even know I had. Every punch was a betrayal, every combination a lie Sarah had told. By the time I was done, my knuckles were raw, but my mind was crystal clear. I knew exactly what I was going to do. The plan came to me in pieces over the next week, each element falling into place like a perfectly choreographed fight combination. Sarah had taught me something valuable during our marriage. Patience and preparation always beat raw emotion. She was still playing the devoted wife during the day, still accepting my care and attention while planning my destruction at night. But now I was playing a role too, and I'd always been better at taking hits than she realized. "Danny," I said during our morning coffee meeting at the office, "I need you to make some calls to our contacts at Pinnacle." "What kind of calls?" "The kind that let them know their golden boy Brad has been sharing confidential client information with unauthorized parties." Danny raised an eyebrow. "You want to get him fired?" "I want to get him investigated. There's a difference." I slid a folder across the table containing printouts of Sarah's system access logs, time-stamped and cross-referenced with Pinnacle's successful bids against us. "This is enough to prove corporate espionage," Danny whistled low. "Mike, this could destroy both of them." "That's the idea. And Sarah were just the opening round. The real fight was with Jennifer, and I was starting to understand her game. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I made dinner reservations at Chez Laurent, Sarah's favorite restaurant. The same place where, according to her credit card statements, she'd been having intimate lunches with Brad. "What's the occasion?" Sarah asked when I told her about the reservation. "Does a man need an occasion to take his wife out for a romantic dinner?" She looked genuinely surprised, and for a moment, the old Sarah flickered in her eyes. The woman who used to laugh at my jokes and steal food off my plate. That's really sweet, Mike." I know things have been stressful with work. I thought we could use some time together. The guilt that flashed across her face was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. Almost. At dinner, I played the role of the devoted husband perfectly. I asked about her work, complimented her dress, and listened attentively to her stories about office politics. Stories that, I now realized, were carefully edited versions of the truth. "Sarah," I said over dessert, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. The way you've grown in your career, the confidence you've gained. You've become this amazing woman I'm lucky to be married to." She reached across the table and took my hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Mike, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." What I didn't say was that I was proud of her professional growth. The personal choices she'd made were a different story entirely. On the drive home, Sarah was quieter than usual. She kept glancing at me like she was seeing me for the first time in months. "Mike, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy? I mean, really happy with our life?" The question caught me off guard, mainly because it seemed genuine. "Are you asking because you're not?" "I don't know," she said softly. "Sometimes I feel like we've become strangers living in the same house." For a moment, I considered telling her everything, laying out what I knew and giving her a chance to come clean. But then I remembered the cruelty in her text messages, the casual way she'd planned to destroy me, and the moment passed. "Marriage takes work," I said instead, "but I think we're worth fighting for." She squeezed my hand. "I hope so." That night, Sarah curled up against me in bed for the first time in months. She fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if any part of her regret was real. It didn't matter. The wheels were already in motion. The next morning, Danny called with an update that made me smile. Pinnacle's internal audit team is very interested in our documentation. Apparently, Brad's been sloppy about covering his tracks on their end, too. How sloppy? Sloppy enough that they're launching a full investigation. And Mike? They're not just looking at Brad. They're looking at all his recent associations, including married women with access to competitor information. How long before this becomes official? End of the week? Maybe sooner. I thought about Sarah's dinner conversation, her moment of seeming regret. "Danny, I need you to do one more thing. I need a complete financial audit of our personal and business accounts. Everything Sarah has access to. Relinquishing for more theft? Unless looking for patterns." The audit results came back 2 days later, and they painted a picture that made my chest tight with a mixture of rage and admiration. Sarah had been systematically moving money from our joint accounts into a private account I didn't know existed. Small amounts, carefully spaced out, nothing that would trigger automatic alerts. Over 6 months, she'd moved nearly $30,000. Our vacation fund, our emergency savings, even money from our daughter Emma's college account. Emma, our 17-year-old daughter who was away at boarding school, blissfully unaware that her parents' marriage was imploding. Emma, who called every Sunday to chat with both of us, who sent funny memes to our family group chat, who trusted that her world was stable and secure. That night, I made a decision that would have consequences I couldn't fully predict. I called Emma. "Dad, this is a surprise. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just missed hearing your voice." "Aw, you're getting sentimental in your old age," she teased. "Mom says you've been working too hard lately." "Your mother says a lot of things. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay, now you're scaring me. When you were home last month, did you notice anything different about your mom? Different behavior, different attitude?" Was a long pause. "Dad, are you and Mom having problems? I'm just trying to understand some things. Please, just answer the question." Another pause. "She's been different, more focused on herself, I guess. And she's been getting a lot of phone calls she takes in private. Plus, she asked me weird questions about you." "What kind of questions?" "Like, whether I thought you were happy, whether you ever talked about feeling trapped or wanting a different life. It felt like she was fishing for something. My daughter was 17 years old, and she'd picked up on things I'd been blind to for months. Emma, I want you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, it has nothing to do with you. You are the best thing we ever did together, and that will never change. Dad, you're really scaring me now. Don't be scared, sweetheart. Just remember that sometimes adults make choices that hurt other people. And when that happens, there are consequences. But you're safe, and you're loved, and that's all you need to worry about. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about consequences and choices, and the difference between justice and revenge. By morning, I decided I didn't care about the difference anymore. Friday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. Sarah was getting ready for another late night at the office, humming while she applied makeup I'd never seen before. She'd been lighter all week, almost giddy, and I suspected she and Brad had made some kind of decision about their future. Our future, actually, since it involved destroying mine. "Don't wait up," she called from the bathroom. "This Henderson account is finally coming together." "I'm you," I called back, and meant it in a way she'd never understand. I waited until her white crossover disappeared around the corner, then made a phone call that had been 3 years in the making. "Jennifer, it's Mike. We need to talk." "Mike? Is everything okay? You sound—" "I know about Sarah and Brad. I know about the money. And I know about your little revenge scheme." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Riverside Cafe. 1 hour. Come alone, or I start making phone calls to people who are very interested in your recent activities." Jennifer was already seated when I arrived, looking smaller and more nervous than I'd ever seen her. 3 years ago, when I'd fired her for embezzling client funds, she'd been defiant, threatening to sue for wrongful termination. Now she looked like a woman who knew her carefully laid plans were unraveling. "You look good, Jennifer. Unemployment seems to agree with you." "What do you want, Mike?" Sat down across from her and pulled out a folder. "I want to understand the timeline. When did you first approach Sarah about having an affair?" "I didn't—" Manslaughter. "Please, we're past the denial stage." I opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. It showed Jennifer and Brad having coffee together, taken 2 weeks before Sarah's first late night at the office. Stranger stared at the photo, her face cycling through several emotions before settling on resigned anger. "You destroyed my career." "You destroyed your career when you stole from my clients. I just documented it. Do you have any idea what it's like to be blacklisted in this town? To have every job interview end the moment they call for references? I imagine it's frustrating, but not as frustrating as discovering that your wife's best friend has been orchestrating the destruction of your marriage for 3 years." Jenner's laugh was bitter. "Sarah was so easy to manipulate. All I had to do was point out how much better she could do, how much she'd grown beyond you. Plant a few seeds about her worth, her potential, her options. And Brad? Brad's an idiot who thinks with his Johnson. I told him Sarah was unhappy, that she had access to valuable business information, and that she'd be grateful to any man who showed her the attention she deserved. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. So, you never cared about Sarah's happiness. This was always about hurting me. You ruined my life, Mike. Seemed fair to return the favor. I strained her face, looking for any trace of remorse or regret. There was none. Here's what's going to happen, Jennifer. You're going to call Sarah right now and tell her to meet you here. You're going to confess everything, the manipulation, the setup, all of it. And then you're going to disappear from our lives forever. And if I don't? I slid another photograph across the table. This one showed Jennifer leaving Brad's apartment building at 6 in the morning, clearly taken several weeks ago. Then I call Brad and let him know that his co-conspirator has been playing both sides. I also call Sarah and show her the evidence of how you've been manipulating her. Finally, I call the district attorney and provide evidence of an ongoing conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. McConnell's face went pale. You can't prove... I can prove all of it. Sarah's been accessing confidential files and sharing them with Brad, who's been using them to undercut our bids. You've been facilitating and encouraging this relationship. That's conspiracy, Jennifer. That's federal charges. Lean forward. But here's the thing. I don't want to destroy Sarah's life. Despite everything, I still love my wife. She made terrible choices, but she made them because you spent 3 years poisoning her mind against me. So what do you want? I want the truth. All of it. Tonight. Senator stared at the photographs for a long moment, then pulled out her phone. 20 minutes later, Sarah rushed into the cafe, her face flushed with panic. She saw Jennifer and me sitting together and stopped dead. What's going on? Jennifer, you sounded... She noticed the photographs on the table and her voice died. Sit down, Sarah. She sat slowly, her eyes moving between Jennifer and me like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Jennifer has something to tell you, I said. What followed was the most uncomfortable conversation of my life. Jennifer, faced with the choice between confession and criminal charges, laid out 3 years of careful manipulation. How she'd planted doubts about our marriage, encouraged Sarah's professional ambitions while undermining her personal contentment, and finally introduced her to Brad with a specific plan in mind. Sarah's face went through a range of emotions: confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally, a rage I'd never seen before. You used me, she whispered. Sarah, you have to understand. You used me to hurt my husband. You made me betray the man I married, steal from our business, plan to destroy our family. All because you were angry about losing a job you deserved to lose? Tried to defend herself, but Sarah was beyond listening. She turned to me with tears streaming down her face. Mike, I am so sorry. I don't know how to... We'll figure it out, I said quietly. But first, we need to deal with Brad. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and her face crumpled. He wants to meet tomorrow night. He says he has big news about our future. Like Jennifer, who was studying her hands. Let me guess. He's going to propose that Sarah leave me and move in with him. Probably has some story about a big promotion or new opportunity. Jennifer nodded Minecraft. Jennifer nodded miserably. Here's what we're going to do, I said. Sarah, you're going to meet Brad tomorrow night as planned. But this time, you're going to be wearing a wire. Saturday evening arrived with the weight of finality. Sarah sat in our living room, adjusting the small recording device Danny had provided, her hands shaking slightly. I can't believe I'm doing this. Shields, you don't have to, I said for the 3rd time. We have enough evidence to destroy Brad professionally without putting you through this. Unless... No, her voice was firm. I need to hear what he really thinks of me. I need to know if any of it was real. I understood the feeling. The need to know exactly how thoroughly you'd been fooled. Sarah left for her meeting with Brad at 7. I followed at a distance, Danny riding up front with monitoring equipment that would let us hear everything in real time. They met at Vincenzo's, an upscale Italian place downtown. Through the restaurant's windows, I could see Brad presenting Sarah with a small gift box. Jewelry from the size of it. He was animated, excited, clearly delivering the big news he'd promised. In our van, Danny and I listened to the conversation through Sarah's wire. Sarah, baby, I have incredible news. The promotion came through. Regional manager. $100,000 raise. Company car, the works. Brad, that's wonderful. It gets better. I found us a place as just anything that we call. It just excited to the weather setting that we did not. Through the restaurants, Danny putting up the lifelike. Sarah, Brad gets better. I found us a place. A penthouse downtown. 2 bedrooms. View of the river. We can move in next month. Move in? Come on, don't play coy. We've been planning this for months. You file for divorce, we get married, and start the life we deserve together. There was a pause. In the restaurant, I could see Sarah opening the gift box. Even from a distance, I could tell it was an engagement ring. Brad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course, baby. Anything. I need to ask you something. If you're one thing with life like Brad, I didn't know that. Let's say, Brad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course, baby. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." There was a pause. In the restaurant, I could see Sarah opening the gift box. There was a pause. "Do you love me? Really love me? Not just the excitement of the affair or the business information I've been giving you. Me, as a person." Brad's laugh came through the wire, clear as day. "Sarah, you're beautiful, you're successful, and you've made me a fortune with those contract details. What's not to love?" "That's not what I asked. Look, we're great together. We want the same things. We're both ambitious. We both deserve better than what we had. Isn't that enough?" I watched Sarah's shoulders sag slightly. "What about Mike?" she asked. "What about him?" "Sarah, the guy fixes cars and runs a 2-bit security company. You're closing million-dollar deals. You've outgrown him, and it's time to stop pretending otherwise." "He's not a bad person, Brad. He's a loser, Sarah. A has-been boxer who peaked in high school. You said it yourself. You're out of his league." The cruelty in Brad's voice was casual, dismissive. He wasn't just talking about stealing another man's wife. He was talking about discarding someone he considered beneath notice. "I did say that," Sarah said quietly. "But I was wrong." "What do you mean?" "Mind isn't out of my league. I'm out of his. He's loyal, honest, hardworking, and devoted to his family. What am I? A cheater, a thief, and a woman who is so easily manipulated that I nearly destroyed my marriage over flattery and expensive dinners. Sarah, you're being too others. Sarah, you're being too healthy." She could have got a lot of those likes a cheater. At the cheater, a thief, and a woman who was so easily manipulated that I nearly destroyed my marriage, that I nearly destroyed my marriage, that I nearly destroyed my marriage. Sarah, you're being too much. Sarah, you're being too greater. And knowing who, you're being too hard on yourself. Brad, tell me something. If I didn't have access to Mike's business information, would you still want to be with me? The pause that followed was answer enough. "That's what I thought," Sarah said. Through the window, I watched her stand up and remove the engagement ring, setting it on the table. "We're done, Brad. All of it. The affair, the business arrangement, whatever future you thought we had planned." "Sarah, wait." "No. I'm going home to my husband, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I've done to him." Through the wire, we heard Sarah walking away, her heels clicking on the restaurant's marble floor. Brad called after her, his voice getting louder and more desperate, but she didn't stop. Danny and I sat in the van, listening to the silence. "Well," Danny said finally, "that was unexpected." Sarah climbed into the van, tears streaming down her face, but her expression determined. "Did you get what you needed?" "At the recording device." "More than enough. What happens now?" "Now we go home and figure out how to rebuild our marriage. But first, we're going to make sure Brad faces consequences for what he's done." The next morning, I hand-delivered copies of our evidence to 3 different parties. Pinnacle Security's Board of Directors, the District Attorney's Office, and the state licensing board that regulated security companies. By noon, Brad had been fired and escorted from Pinnacle's offices by security. By evening, he was facing criminal charges for corporate espionage and conspiracy. His professional licenses were suspended pending investigation, and his name was being circulated throughout the industry as someone who couldn't be trusted. Jennifer had already left town, but not before I'd made sure her role in the conspiracy was fully documented. She'd face charges too, if she ever returned. Sarah and I spent that evening in our kitchen, talking more honestly than we had in years. She told me about the gradual erosion of her contentment, how Jennifer's constant suggestions had made her question everything about our life together, how the attention from Brad had made her feel valued in a way she'd forgotten she needed. "I'm not making excuses," she said. "What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you. I stole from our business. I was planning to destroy our family. But I need you to understand how it happened, so we can make sure it never happens again." "Do you want it to never happen again?" I asked. "Because, Sarah, this isn't just about forgiveness. This is about whether we can build something worth saving." She took my hands across the kitchen table. the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals and conversations over 15 years of marriage. Mike, I spent 6 months thinking I was too good for you. It took almost losing you to realize the truth. I'm not good enough for you. But if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of our marriage trying to be. We didn't fix everything that night, or that week, or even that month. Rebuilding trust is a slow process, and there were setbacks and difficult conversations, and moments when I wasn't sure we'd make it. But we did make it. Sarah left her job at Morrison & Associates and joined our company, bringing her skills and contacts to help us grow. She took a polygraph test and submitted to regular audits to prove she wasn't sharing confidential information. She went to counseling, both individually and with me, to understand how she'd been manipulated and to develop better defenses against future manipulation. Most importantly, she earned back my trust through consistent actions over time. Emma came home for Christmas break to find her parents closer than they'd been in years. She never knew the full details of what had happened, but she noticed the change in our relationship. "You guys are gross," she announced one evening, finding us slow dancing in the kitchen while dinner cooked. But like good gross, happy gross. Impunity 3 months after the confrontation at Vincenzo's, I got a call from Danny with an update on Brad's situation. "Thought you'd want to know. He pled guilty to avoid trial. Got 2 years probation, 5,000 hours of community service, and permanent disbarment from the security industry." "What's he doing now?" "Last I heard, he was working at a car wash outside of town. Apparently, his reputation preceded him when he tried to find work in the corporate world." I felt a satisfaction that was probably unworthy of me, but I didn't care. Actions have consequences, and Brad was learning that lesson the hard way. As for Jennifer, she never returned to town. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to another state and was working under a different name, but I didn't pursue it. Some battles aren't worth continuing once they're won. 6 months later, Sarah and I renewed our wedding vows in a small ceremony at our church, with Emma as our only witness. It wasn't about erasing what had happened. That was impossible. It was about choosing to build something new on the foundation of what we'd learned. In my vows, I promised to love Sarah not just in spite of her mistakes, but because of how she'd faced them and worked to make amends. In her vows, she promised to never again let anyone convince her that our marriage was worth less than her ambitions. "Mike," she said, holding my hands in front of our daughter and our pastor, "I spent months thinking I was out of your league. But leagues don't matter when you find someone worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for. We're worth fighting for." That night, as we lay in bed talking about our future, Sarah asked me a question that had been bothering her. "Do you think you'll ever be able to completely forgive me?" I'm not thought about it for a long moment. I think forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every day. And I choose to forgive you every day because I choose to love you every day. Even after everything I did, Sarah, you made terrible choices, but you also made the choice to come back. You chose truth over comfort, our marriage over your affair, and rebuilding over running away. Those choices matter more than the mistakes. 2 years later, our marriage is stronger than it's ever been. We work together, we parent together, and we've built something that can withstand the kind of challenges that used to break us. Sarah was right about one thing. She was out of my league, but not in the way she originally thought. She was out of my league because she was capable of deception, betrayal, and casual cruelty that I never could have imagined. But she was also capable of courage, honesty, and the kind of hard work that real love requires. In the end, we both learned that leagues don't matter when two people are committed to playing the same game.